On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, how have container ships and container lines fared over the first 25 years of the 21st century? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, a quarter of a century is in the books. We're going to take a look back at container ships and container lines thanks to a story from Sam Chambers over at Splash 24/7 and some new research coming out from Sea Intelligence. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the story by Sam over at Splash 24/7, how the liner lineup has changed this century. Of the 50 largest container shipping lines in the world in the year 2000, only 24 are still in existence, according to new research from Denmark's Sea Intelligence. It's even more interesting than that. If you look at those 50 largest container firms, the top 20 of those firms in the year 2000 controlled about 50% of all the at-sea container capacity. Today, 2025, the top 10 control nearly 85%. So we're going to look at both container capacity, we're going to look at the container lines, and of course, we're going to look at the container ships themselves. So in Sam's piece, he talks about the idea that in the year 2000, there were 2.5 million TEU capacity afloat. Now, he has a great chart for that, but that's not the way we roll here at What's Going On with Shipping. When we need to show something graphically, we use Lego blocks, and I use my big hunkin' Lego blocks. That's right. So if this is our capacity of container ships in the year 2000, 2.5 million TEU, what's our capacity today in terms of that? Here is our capacity of containers afloat today. 2.5 million back then, 26.7 million today. And of these, a third of them, those in red, are built in China. So again, just maybe a little tiny little piece here of this that we're seeing. And you get the growth right here, over 1,000% growth in 25 years. That is quite substantial, I have to say. Sam goes on to discuss the fact that of the 26 newcomers that have come into the top 50, there's 24 surviving companies. But of the 26 newcomers that come in, they only operate 6% of the global fleet, while the remaining 24 operate 84% of it. I think those numbers tell a whole story into themselves. So let's take a look at that fleet way back in 2000. This is the review of maritime transport for the year 2001. It lists the top 20 ocean carriers for containers out then. At number 1, Maersk Sealand, Denmark company. This is shortly after Maersk acquired Sealand, which was a U.S. company. The company reflagged itself, moved itself under Maersk. They reflagged their ships, and you lost the premier U.S. carrier. In 2001, 297 ships, 694,000 TEU capacity. We're going to come back to that number, by the way. But then you see companies, and a lot of these no longer exist. For example, at number 2, P&O Ned Lloyd, they're no longer in existence. Evergreen's still around. Hanjin went bankrupt in 2017. You got Mediterranean Shipping, NOL, APL, they're under CMA, CGM. Costco, NYK is under ONE. CP Ships, they don't exist. They're under Hauppauge now. CMA, CGM, MOL, K-Line, they're all under ONE. Zim is out there. OCL, they're under Costco now. Hauppauge still out there. Yangmin is out there. China Shipping is under Costco. Hyundai is now HMM. CSAV, not sure where they're under, actually. I meant to go check that, but I'm not sure. And Hamburg Sud, sorry. Hungry, it's almost lunchtime. Hamburg Sud is under Maersk Lines. But you see roughly here, the world fleet of ships is roughly around 7,000 container ships with a capacity, need my old spectacles here, 6.6 million TEUs. Let's jump over to the modern day. So remember Maersk and their nearly 300 ships? Well, 736 ships today, 4.6 million TEU capacity. I mean, they had 600,000 TEU capacity 25 years ago. Now they've just added 4 million TEUs on top of that. More importantly, Mediterranean, with 20% of the capacity, they have 6.5 million TEU capacity. So MSC alone nearly has the entire global capacity that existed 25 years ago. And you'll notice on there, their existing fleet, they're building out. They are going to be the behemoth out there And you look at the top companies, Maersk, CMA, CGM with 12%, Costco with 10, Hauppauge with 7.5, ONE with 6.3, Evergreen 5.7, HMM 2.9, Zim at 2.4, and then Yangmin at 2.2. Let's not forget we've got alliances. So MSC is on their own. We have the new Gemini, that is Maersk and Hauppauge together. Then you have the Ocean Alliance, that is CMA, CGM, Costco, and Evergreen. And then you have all the rest in the Premier Alliance. That would be ONE, HMM, Yangmin together in those alliances. So you've seen a massive consolidation and concentration in the hands of companies, and we've seen this explosive growth of the size of vessels. Let's look at that growth of vessels in a little more detail. That growth in the number of ships and the size of ships have also facilitated global trade. This is the chart out of the most recent review of maritime transport 2024. Go back to the year 2000 and you'll see the trade in TEUs. These are 20-foot equivalent units. These are 20-foot long container boxes. You normally see 40-footers, FEUs on ships, but they measure everything in TEUs. In 2000, roughly over 60 million TEUs were traded annually. Fast forward to 2024, over 160 million containers are moving. And then when you look at the percentage of growth, it's a fairly steady growth between 5 to 10%, with some peaks up here as high as 15% and lows down into the -8 in 2008. And again in 2020 down into the negatives. So where does that 166 million TEUs trade? Well, the vast majority of it, the largest single percentage of that, is nearly 60 million containers are on that main east-west route between Europe and Asia. This is why the closure of the Red Sea was so significant. Alphaliner just dropped their list of ports, top 30 ports in 2024. I'm going to do a separate video on this, bring out those big Lego blocks again to talk about it. Here you see Shanghai, the dominant port. 51.5 million TEUs move through that port. It's almost a 19% growth since 2019. It's almost a 5% growth since last year. And again, China dominating those top levels. LA and Long Beach is at number 9. Busan in Korea is at number 7. And Dubai and Jebel Ali at number 10. All the rest are Chinese ports. Remember, those Chinese ports, a lot of them are transshipment points. So you're moving and consolidating a lot of containers in and out of the ports. They're not really through ports to introduce containers into the interior. They're consolidating and loading them. The other element here is the construction of container ships. So another Sam Chambers story. This is also from the end of last month. New build prices forecast to stall this year. So we're looking at the prices of vessels to kind of flatten out here. And what we're seeing has been a massive building program that came out of COVID because of the influx of cash into the hands of the container liners, and because they needed to build interim ships, interim meaning before the new 2050 fuel standards go into effect. They need to build ships that will last them from today, 2025, to 2050. If you assume a service life of a ship from 15 to 25 years, got to be building it now. So we've seen a massive construction program that has been undertaken in the field of container ships. This chart shows you active building facilities per year and region. One of the big things has been the reduction in the number of shipyards around the world. We had a peak in 2007 with 739 ship facilities, down to 348. That's almost a 50% reduction. It was even more pronounced not too long ago. We've seen a bit of an uptick. And when you look at the amount of building that's being done in terms of deadweight tonnage, China has been steadily growing to the point that in 2024, for example, they produced more ships in 2024 than were produced in all of 2009 combined. I mean, we're just seeing China become the dominant building force in the world, hence the Section 301 U.S. Trade Representative report and the efforts being undertaken right now to minimize the impact of Chinese shipbuilding and maritime dominance with the port fees. When you look at shipyard groups, we've seen the consolidation, not just shipyards, but into these massive shipyard groups. These are the 10 biggest ones around the world in China, Japan, and Korea. And you can see the power of China here with the Chinese State Shipbuilding Corporation Group. They're building over 877 ships, nearly 90 million deadweight tons of capacity. Compare that to other yards and other groups around, you can see the impact they have. Other Chinese groups are included in there. The Yangziang Group, CMHI Group, CSHI Group, NTS Group. You can see the power of those. You still have some Japanese and Korean corporations in there too, but China definitely being the dominant shipbuilder. So I want to end on two last slides from Alphaliner, which I think go even more into the details about how the container ship fleet is changing. As we hit the quarter century here of the 21st century, we're looking at a substantial change in the way we move container cargo around the planet. This chart here shows you new building delivery projections. So the top upper left here shows you deliveries expected of ships in their different sizes, all the way up from the ultra large container vessels down to small regional feeder vessels. And you can see the massive number of ships, 470 ships estimated to be coming in 2024, 2.9 million TEUs, 250 ships, 2.1 million TEUs in 2025, 158, 1.5 million TEUs, and 2027, 234 ships, 2.9 million TEUs. When you look at the graph here in the upper right, you can see that the biggest block of capacity is in these vessels greater than 15,000 TEU. These are what we identify largely as these ultra-large container vessels. Now, these type vessels are too large to go through the Panama Canal. But when you look here from 2023 all the way to 2027, they represent the single largest group. The next biggest block are those between 10 and 15,000 TEU, and in particularly those between 12,500 and roughly 15,000 TEU. These are the Neo-Panamax vessels. These are the vessels that can go through both the Suez and the Panama Canal, and a much larger percentage is being built of those now. When you look at how the fleet looks in terms of the end state of the fleet, this is the lower left, you can see the growth in that fleet. In December of 2024, nearly 6,398 vessels, a capacity of 31 million TEU. It's going to go up to 33 million TEU in 2025. At the end of 2026, up to 34.6 million TEU. And then in 2027, we're going to break over 7,000 ships, 37.5 million TEU. And if you look at that breakout, you can see how the ultra large container vessels, the ones over 15,000 TEU in the red, just become a much more larger segment until they become the largest single segment in 2027. Then they're followed by those ships just under Neo-Panamax and then the Neo-Panamax vessels. Finally, this chart shows you container ship fleet building zones per the TEU range. Where are these ships being built? You can see smaller vessels, the feeder vessels, less than roughly around 3,000 TEU in this gray area. This is China. China builds roughly around, has got about 2,442 ships built. As you get into the mid-size, China is doing a large portion of that, but the very large ones are being built in Korea. This is where Korea has their dominance. China is not quite yet building the massive large vessels. When you look at the number of Chinese vessels in different fleets, COSCO, for example, nearly 60% of their fleet are built in China. CMA CGM, 41%. MSC, 24%. Maersk, nearly 27%. Hapag, 23%. ONE, the Japanese firm, 26.4%. PIL, this is Pacific International, Singapore, nearly 60%. Express feeders that do kind of coastal inner traffic, 59.4%. I want to jump down here. Zim, 43%. And then Evergreen. Evergreen is the most interesting because they are Taiwanese. They are having ships built in China, but not a lot. They're just at roughly 16%. And then you can see the top shipyards with ships on order. And then you can see where the container ship book is. Many of them are now going into China. China is going to supplant Korea here in the building of vessels. We're seeing that happen. So I want to leave you with this comment from Sam Chambers' original article. It took the industry about 50 years to reach the 5 million TEU mark in 2001. 50 years. You got to remember, in 2000, we were talking about 8,000 TEU ships being big. The Review of Maritime Transport talks about the prospect of 12,000 TEU ships. We're at 24,000 TEU. And last year, we had China unveil plans for ships up to 27 to 32,000 TEU. Sam goes on, by contrast, the leap from 20 million TEU to 30 million TEU was achieved in just 7 years. It took us 7 years to go from 20 million TEUs to 30 million TEUs. And what's interesting about this is I do a discussion in my history classes on world population. It took from the dawn of time until the year 1800 to get the first billion people on the planet. We hit 7 billion people on this planet in 2011. We hit 8 billion people on this planet in 2022. So looking at population growth, the TEU growth, they kind of follow this massive trajectory. It took 11 years to put a billion people on this planet. That correlates with an uptick in cargo shipment. It also correlates with an uptick that a lot of people are getting down on this planet. I'm surprised this planet's not rocking more. But what we see is as population growth increases, as trade increases, we're seeing the world's container fleet match that. And when you measure these elements, you can begin to understand global trade in 2000 was 6 billion tons. In 2024, it was 12 billion tons. We doubled our world trade. And so larger ships, which are steaming slower now because of fuel constraints and fuel restrictions, but the ships are much bigger, are delivering cargo around the planet. I just love talking of ship with you all because this is best. And probably some of my favorite ship to talk about is container ships. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly and yearly subscriber. And where does your money go when you contributed to this channel? Big honkin' Lego bricks. That's where your money goes. You're seeing your donation to the channel right here. You think these come cheap? They don't. These are big Lego blocks. They don't just grow on trees. They're grown in Denmark. I have to get them from Denmark here to North Carolina. And how do I get them here? I ship them here. Till next episode, this is Sal, signing off.